Your uniform is a symbol of hate. You fascists deserve this." The protester shrieked just before the can of bright red paint arced through the air, splattering across the chest of Master Sergeant Daniel "Danny" Coles. Pristine Marine Corps dress blues. Danny, 73, standing stoically at attention during a quiet Veterans Day wreath-laying ceremony, didn't even flinch as the cold paint soaked through, dripping onto the polished stone. He just closed his eyes for a brief second, a deep pain etching itself onto his weathered face. 10 minutes later, as the small crowd buzzed with shock and the protester was being detained by stunned civilian security, the distinctive ground-shaking rumble of heavy tactical vehicles and the rhythmic beat of boots on pavement announced an entirely different kind of arrival. If you believe desecrating the uniform is desecrating honor itself, type honor below. Master Sergeant Daniel "Danny" Cole, USMC, RET-T, believed in duty, honor, and the immaculate presentation of his dress blues. At 73, he was a living testament to the Corps' highest traditions. His posture was still ramrod straight, his movements precise, though a slight limp from an old IED blast sometimes betrayed his age. He lived alone in a small, meticulously tidy apartment. His days were ordered by routine and a quiet sense of purpose. He volunteered at the local VFW, mentored young Marines preparing for their first deployment, and polished his medals, the Navy Cross, multiple Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, not for show, but as a weekly ritual of remembrance for the brothers he'd lost. Today was Veterans Day, and Danny Cole was the guest of honor at a small, solemn wreath-laying ceremony at the city's modest Veterans Memorial Park. It wasn't a grand parade, just a quiet gathering of local veterans, a few city officials, and a handful of respectful citizens. He wore his dress blues, the iconic uniform perfectly pressed, his medals gleaming softly in the crisp November sunlight. He stood at attention, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, listening to the mayor deliver a heartfelt, if somewhat generic, speech about sacrifice. He wasn't there for himself, but for the memory of those who couldn't stand there with him. A small group of protesters had gathered on the far side of the park, their chants occasionally audible over the mayor's words. They were protesting a recent international conflict, their anger directed broadly at anything military-related. Danny Tapa acknowledged their right to be there, even if he didn't agree with their methods or their message. As the mayor concluded his remarks, and a bugler began to play a soulful rendition of Taps, the mood at the ceremony was one of quiet reverence. Most of the protesters remained on the park's periphery. However, one particularly agitated individual, a young man dressed in black, his face contorted with rage, broke away from the main group and began striding aggressively toward the memorial where Danny Cole stood beside the mayor and other dignitaries. He carried a small, concealed can. Civilian security, mostly a couple of older gentlemen from the Parks Department, were slow to react, not anticipating such a direct confrontation at this solemn moment. The young man reached the edge of the ceremonial area just as Taps concluded, and a moment of silence was being observed. "This whole charade is a lie!" he screamed, his voice cracking with fury, shattering the respectful quiet. "Your wars are for profit. Your uniforms are symbols of oppression and hate." He pointed directly at Danny, who had turned slowly to face him, his expression unreadable, but his posture still perfectly at attention. "You fascists deserve this!" the protester shrieked, and then, with a swift, violent motion, he shook the can he was holding and flung its contents directly at Danny Cole. A spray of bright crimson-red paint arced through the air, splattering across the chest and shoulders of Danny's pristine dress blues, dripping onto the white gloves, staining the polished leather of his ceremonial belt. The red against the dark blue was a shocking, visceral desecration. A collective gasp went up from the onlookers. The mayor flinched, The other veterans looked on in stunned, furious disbelief. Danny Cole didn't move a muscle as the cold, wet paint hit him. He didn't cry out, didn't curse, didn't even break his stance of attention. He simply closed his eyes for a brief second. A flicker of profound pain, not physical, but something far deeper, crossing his weathered features. The red paint dripped down his jacket, pooling slightly on the meticulously shined toes of his dress shoes. The protester, seemingly exultant, raised his fist in the air. "No more wars! No more killers in uniform!" he yelled before the two stunned Parks Department security guards finally roused themselves and moved, albeit clumsily, to apprehend him. He offered little resistance, clearly considering his mission accomplished, a smirk of triumph on his face as he was led away. The ceremony dissolved into shocked murmurs. The mayor and other officials rushed toward Danny, expressing outrage and concern, offering handkerchiefs, water. Danny waved them off gently. "I'm all right," he said, his voice raspy, though his eyes held a deep, cold fire. He looked down at his desecrated uniform, the bright red a grotesque stain on the deep blue, a physical manifestation of the insult. This wasn't just paint on cloth. It was an attack on everything he held sacred, his service, his corps, the memory of his fallen comrades. He unbuttoned his jacket slowly, his movement stiff. He knew the uniform was likely ruined beyond repair. More than that, the act itself, the public defilement, felt like a deep personal wound. He saw the distress on the faces of his fellow veterans, the anger in their eyes. He needed to do something. Not for himself, but for them, for the uniform. He calmly took out his old military-issue flip phone. He didn't dial the local police, who were already on scene dealing with the arrested protester. He scrolled to a specific contact, one reserved for situations of extreme dishonor or threat to the Marine Corps community. Marcom, Command Duty Officer, Code Red Protocol. He knew this was an extreme measure, but this felt like an extreme situation. He pressed dial. The call was answered instantly, bypassing any automated system. "Marcom CDO, this is Captain Reynolds. Authenticate and report." "This is Master Sergeant Cole Daniel, retired," Danny stated, his voice low but firm. "Authentication code Kilo 79er Alpha. Reporting code Red Incident. Location, City Veterans Memorial Park downtown. Uniformed Marine personnel, myself, assaulted with thrown paint during official Veterans Day ceremony. Perpetrator apprehended by local PD, significant disrespect to the uniform and potential for further civil unrest or copycat incidents targeting service members. Requesting immediate USMC liaison presence and situational assessment." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then, Captain Reynolds' voice, now stripped of any routine professionalism and imbued with a cold, hard edge, responded, "Understood, Master Sergeant Cole. Code Red Protocol initiated. Stand by for immediate support. A Marine Expeditionary Unit is currently conducting urban training exercises less than 15 miles from your location. Expect a robust liaison presence. ETA approximately 10 minutes or less. Are you injured, Master Sergeant?" "Negative, Captain," Danny replied. "Just my uniform and my patience." "Roger that, Master Sergeant. Hold fast. The United States Marine Corps is en route." The line disconnected. Danny pocketed his phone. He knew what robust liaison presence from an MEU meant. It wasn't just a couple of officers in a staff car. It meant the Marines were taking this personally. He looked at the stunned faces around him, the police now trying to manage the agitated crowd, the deflated ceremony. He just waited. 8 minutes, then 9. The distant, rhythmic thumping of helicopter rotors began to filter through the city sounds, growing rapidly louder. Then, from multiple directions, the unmistakable ground-shaking rumble of heavy tactical vehicles. The first to arrive were 2 Cobra attack helicopters, which suddenly appeared low over the city buildings, executing a slow, deliberate, and incredibly intimidating flyover of the Veterans Memorial Park before peeling off to circle at a higher altitude. Their message was clear: air superiority established. Almost simultaneously, from every major street leading to the park, a convoy of Marine Corps vehicles materialized. LAVs, light-armored vehicles, Humvees, and several large MTVR troop transport trucks. They moved with practiced, overwhelming speed and precision, not with sirens but with the sheer, undeniable authority of their presence, their heavy tires thundering on the pavement. Within 90 seconds, the entire city block surrounding the Veterans Memorial Park was completely and utterly sealed off by a ring of steel and determined Marines. Marines in full combat utilities, helmets on, rifles carried at the ready though pointed safely downward, disembarked and established a calm, disciplined, and utterly impenetrable perimeter. Local police found themselves suddenly, and very respectfully, outside this new, much more formidable cordon. The remaining protesters, who had been jeering at the police, fell deathly silent, their faces paling as they took in the sheer scale and seriousness of the Marine response. This wasn't a parade escort. This was a rapid deployment. A Marine captain, his flak jacket adorned with the insignia of a force reconnaissance unit, approached the local police commander, who was looking utterly bewildered. "Sir," the Marine captain said, his voice polite but firm, "the United States Marine Corps is assuming temporary security oversight of this immediate area to ensure the safety of military personnel and the sanctity of this memorial following an assault on a decorated Marine veteran. We will coordinate with your department, but our primary concern is the security of our personnel and the honor of the uniform." The police commander wisely just nodded. From one MRAP, a figure emerged who radiated an aura of absolute command. He was a Marine colonel, the MEU commander, his expression like granite. He strode directly toward where Danny Cole was standing, his stained uniform a stark testament to the incident. The MEU colonel, a man named Henderson, whom Danny vaguely recognized from a past deployment, reached Danny and executed a sharp, impeccable salute. "Master Sergeant Cole," Colonel Henderson said, his voice resonating with controlled fury and deep respect, "I am Colonel Henderson, commanding the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit. I was informed of the outrageous incident that occurred here. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps, I offer you our most profound apologies for the disrespect you were forced to endure. It will not stand." Danny returned the salute, a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate the prompt attention to the matter." "The Marine Corps," Colonel Henderson stated, his voice loud enough for nearby city officials and the remaining, now very subdued, protesters to hear clearly, "does not tolerate assaults on its members, active or retired. We do not tolerate the desecration of our uniform, which is a symbol of the sacrifices made by generations of Marines. And we most certainly do not tolerate such acts on Veterans Day at a Veterans Memorial." He turned to his operations officer. "Major, ensure local law enforcement understands that the individual who assaulted Master Sergeant Cole will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, with the full weight of federal interest behind it if necessary. Also obtain a complete damage assessment for Master Sergeant Cole's uniform and personal effects. The individual responsible, or the organization they represent, will be billed for its replacement at full ceremonial grade." He then addressed the mayor, who had approached, looking deeply shaken. "Mr. Mayor, while we respect the right to peaceful protest, this city has a responsibility to ensure that such protests do not devolve into criminal assault, especially against our nation's veterans. The Marine Corps will be providing a supplementary security presence for the remainder of today's commemorative events to ensure no further incidents occur." The mayor could only nod, clearly out of his depth. The message was not just to the protester, but to the entire city. Disrespect the Corps, and the Corps responds decisively. Danny Cole, was quietly escorted by a Marine honor guard to a waiting vehicle. His stained uniform would be replaced, the protester would face serious charges, and the city learned a valuable lesson about the protective reach of the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. The image of U.S. Marines in combat gear surrounding a city park after a veteran was assaulted went viral, sparking a fierce national debate about freedom of speech, respect for veterans, and the appropriate response to acts of aggression against service members. The protester faced felony assault charges, amplified by hate crime enhancers due to targeting a veteran in uniform. The protest group that spawned the attacker quickly disavowed his actions, their credibility shattered. Danny Cole, true to form, sought no personal vengeance. He simply wanted the principle upheld, that the uniform and the men and women who wear it or have worn it deserve a baseline of respect, regardless of political disagreements. His quiet call had unleashed a response that was far more about that principle than about one stained jacket. The Marine Expeditionary Unit remained discreetly visible in the city for the rest of Veterans Day, their presence ensuring all further commemorative events proceeded without incident. Colonel Henderson personally saw to it that Danny received a brand new, perfectly tailored set of dress blues, along with a formal letter of apology from the city and a commendation from MARCOM for his restraint and proper reporting of the incident. Danny Cole continued his quiet life, but the story of Danny's paint job became a legend within his VFW post and the wider Marine community, a stark reminder that while a Marine might retire from active service, the Corps never truly retires from its commitment to its own, and that sometimes when lines are crossed and honor is impugned, the response will be swift, certain, and will leave no doubt in anyone's mind that the Marines have landed, and the situation is now firmly under control. Because an insult to one Marine is an insult to all, and the Corps always, always answers that call. Subscribe to my channel if you believe that an attack on the uniform is an attack on us all, and that our veterans deserve a shield of honor as strong as their own sacrifice.